So, Mom, when I was a kid, I think around the dinner table every night, I heard stories from work. And they weren't necessarily stories about delivering babies, but they were the stories that patients would tell you as they were in
Yes,
labor.
yes.
Or you would just find
Mm,
out about these interesting women that were having babies and you would tell us about them, of course, in a way that was always professional and never breaking confidence with that patient. But those stories
yeah.
invoked feelings around our dinner table and often good family discussions. So, as you've collected these stories and put them together into a book, what do you want people to feel as they're reading them? Do you want them to have the same feelings that we had as kids around the dinner table?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And this is just the beginning. I mean, there's 600 pages in this book, and maybe it'll be two books, but there are so many stories untold that are just amazing. But I want there to be stories that just laugh really hard. Now, stories that make you think about life and the world and about the kind of life you get to live and the privilege that we have and other people that aren't like us. Can I tell a story? I'm just thinking
Yeah.
of a story that comes to mind. I was taking care of an elderly woman. She'd had a hysterectomy and she was 80 years old. Her name was Iris. Every day as a manager, I rounded on patients and introduced myself as the manager and asked them how their care was and if there was anything we could do for them and if there was anything I could personally do for them. And this Iris greeted me and just, hello, it's so nice to meet you. And she sat me down and she said, she just pulled me down to sit by her on her bed. And she said, I just have had wonderful care, absolutely wonderful care, but I want to tell you what happened to me. And since you're the manager, and I said, oh, I'd love to hear it. And she said, well, my husband was in World War II and he was in the Army Air Corps. And so he learned how to fly a plane. And after the war, he came home and we got married. And of course, his love of flying was second only to his love of me, he said. So he asked if he could buy an airplane and we talked about it and he bought a little Piper airplane and parked it in the barn at the ranch that we owned. And so he would take that little Piper airplane out and he would pilot just, when he had time, he'd just drive around the farm and maybe he dusted crops. I don't remember her telling me that, but she said when we would hear him, no matter where the kids were in our house or out in the yard or out in the barn or out in the fields, they'd come running and we'd all come to the front of the house and we would wave and my husband would fly while my husband was flying by and he would tip his wings at us. And then I knew that he was in the plane and seeing us and he was aware of us and loved us. And he then would park back in the barn and come back home when he was done flying. Well, she said, yesterday, the day before surgery, was so nervous. I just was distraught. I was walking around the house and I was crying. I was upset because I'd never had surgery before and I don't have any children that were able to be here with me. And so she said I just was very, very nervous and I hadn't slept well the night before and I had one more night to sleep before surgery. And she said, all of a sudden I heard this little airplane outside my house. And so I went out the front door and there was a little airplane like my husband flew and the pilot tipped his wings at me. And she said, I just know that my husband's watching over me, that I suddenly just relaxed. I felt comfortable and I knew that I was going to be okay, that I wasn't going to bleed to death on the operating table by myself. And so anyway, those are the kind of stories that just are an inspiration to me and I'm sure one that if you weren't home, if we still had little children at home when that happened, that it was a story that I would have shared with our family for sure. Also, nurses are doing such intimate things for patients. We're listening to their lungs, we're there with them for long periods. We're not kind of in and out like physicians are. Physicians are wonderful too, and physicians take a lot of time with patients sometimes, but nurses are the constant day to day. I might help deliver your baby today, and then tomorrow I'll be taking care of you as a new mom and be teaching you how to breastfeed and how to diaper your baby. So yeah, I think it's a time when women are vulnerable, and it's a time that we share our vulnerableness sometimes with them. Not so much unless they really, seem to want to know, but it's really more about the patients than about us, for sure.
Yeah, anyone who's ever been sick never forgets the nurses that took care of them.
Isn't that interesting?
So you're sharing the stories of these nurses as well as your patients, and I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. I can't remember, I just counted, but I think there's about 25, 30 patients that collaborated on their stories with me, so they're as accurate as I know how to tell them. And about 40 physicians and nurses that have signed off on their participation in these writings as well. So I know they're really worthwhile and honest and transparent stories about real nurses and doctors. And we're very blessed to be able to do what we do.
The real deal, Mom.
Yeah.